All right, everyone. Sorry for starting a bit late, but we're gonna start lecture now. So we're gonna be talking about collection views today. Yeah, let's get right into it. So what are collection views? So that's wait. Okay. So collection views are used in iOS development to display information just like table views, except this time instead of table views, unlike table views, instead of being constrained to like only having rows, we now have multiple cells of items. So to give an example of that, here is a collection view. Your photo album is an example of collection view. So we have like different cells, and each one of these cells could have a different size. So the picture of the dog is a good example because it's just one cell that has the size of about 3 cells. And yeah, that's basically the biggest difference between table views and collection views. Table views have uniform heights for their rows, and you don't really have like this column layout. Whereas with collection views, we have like different items per row, and so we could style our information in a lot prettier fashion. Here's an example of another photo album, except this time we have like unlike table views. So before with table views, we would set it up like row by row, where each one of these like 3 photos are its own row. But now, instead of thinking about it as in terms of rows, we're going to be talking about it in terms of cells, individual cells. In this case, the cells are called items. And each item is going to have its own index, its own like section index. And yeah, we'll go into those terms a bit more later. But that's basically the idea. We have these different items, and like each row could have a different amount of items. In this case, all of them have 3, and that's what a collection view is. Here's a more detailed example of what a collection view could be. So in this case up here, we have like our recently played movies. Yeah. Wait, no. Songs. Yeah. So we have some songs up there with a collection view of like Spider-Man and like Boom. And then at the bottom we have another collection view. I don't really know those songs, but basically these are 2 separate sections. Same thing with like the Netflix view. So we have like a collection view where we have like circles instead of squares, and there are basically 3 different collection views here. Another cool thing about collection views is that you could swipe, instead of going only up and down like with table views, you could swipe from left to right with collection views. So in this case, like if you swipe from left to right on like on Netflix collection view, you'll see more movies. And so there are 3 different collection views on the right image. Is my mouse here? Okay, my mouse is not here. But yeah, this is an example of like different sections within collection views. So yeah. Here's a more detailed example of what those sections are. So I was mentioning earlier how we could have different sections with different items in those sections. So in this case, the top section would have like, it would be called like something like section 1, and we would have like maybe like 5 items in there. Right now we only see like 3, or I mean 4 or 3.5. And then in the second section of the collection view, we have about 3.5 items as well. And then same thing with section 3. Except all of these sections themselves present their own unique information. So you could have different information respective to some section in your collection view. Whereas with like table views, you only really were referring to like one collection of information. And this is how you actually set up a collection view. So you could have some cell data called cell data that could be of type anything really. In this example, I'm using a string. And you could create your collection view by calling like a UICollectionView object with the parentheses. And you do all the normal stuff. You translate auto-resizing mask constraints to false. You set the data source and delegate to be the view controller that you create them in. And you register some cell class for some reuse identifier. And then you add that all to subview. To go into depth a bit more. So when we set the data source for this collection view, we're basically saying that like this information that is going to go into our table and into our collection view is going to come from the view that I created in. So like if I were to relate it back to the contacts demo example, we had a view controller that had an array holding all of like the contact information. And we set the data source in that example of that table view to be itself, to be that view controller that had that context array. So when we have like an array of data, wherever we make that array of data is where we want the source of our collection view's data to be. So usually that's in your main view controller, or like just the main view controller that you create. And so you set wherever you create your collection view is usually where you also have your data. So you just set it to be self. And same thing with delegates. So when we change information, we want to tell our view controller where we created our collection view. We want to tell the view controller where we made it in to be in charge of changing the information that is in my collection view. And yeah, and we also register the cell. So we have like a like collection, a UI collection view cell controller, I think, something like that around those lines. And that's where you actually set up the layout for your cells, kind of like how you had your UI table view cell, your UI table view cell class, which is where you created like the layout of like the, oh no, wait, UI table view row. It's like self for, wait, you have like a different view controller that tells you how to set up the information within the cell. And that's where you set up, that's where you do the register stuff. You register for some cell class, and that cell class is what's telling you how that information within a specific cell is laid out. And then you also have like a reuse identifier. And then you add it to subview. But yeah, that was a lot of information. Anybody got any questions on any of that? This is the first part of code that we're going to be going into. This is just setting up the collection view. You good? Okay. Yeah, I'm breezing through this a bit. I'll slow it down a bit. But yeah, to go a bit more into what that data source actually is. Oops. Okay, wait. Okay. Yeah, so like I said, we're setting the data source to be that current view controller that we're in. And these are some of the functions that we're going to be implementing if we are to set the view controller to be the source of the data for our collection view. So we have a number of items per section. And this is basically, in most cases, this number is like the total number of items that you have in your array. Similar to like how in our table view, for the table view demo, we had like a list of contacts. The size of that table view was basically the size of the array. And in this case, it's almost the same thing. The number of items per section is basically going to be the size of your array of data. And that's going to tell you how many cells there are within some section. And your cell for item at function, that's going to tell you how that's how you're going to tell the collection view how to set up each individual cell. So every cell could have its every cell follows like some design that you give it using your cell class, and you're able to set it up within this function. But yeah, there are a lot of similarities, like I said, between collection views and table views. So this information might sound like very redundant, but these are also like very important functions to implement for a collection view. And yeah. Okay. So to go more into the similarities, we have a function number of rows in section in our table view. This should look a bit familiar. And we also have a cell for wrap function that tells us how to set up the cell. As you can see, both of these functions respectively return an integer and a table view cell. And now, instead of returning an integer and table view cell, we're going to be returning an integer and collection view cell. So it's the same idea. The number of items in section is basically like the number of cells that you have within your collection view. And then your cell for item at is just setting up each individual cell. And you're returning a UI collection view cell. We good so far? I think, okay, yeah. So yeah, this is a bit more information on like the actual like section versus item setup. So in this case, this entire screen is basically one section. And that's, you could tell because like the whole bracket thing, everything is like 0 for the first element in the bracket. And then for the second element, it tells you like which item it is. So you have like item 0 up there, and then you have like item 17 over here at the bottom right. And the reason I kind of wanted to present the screen is so that you guys don't get confused with how like cells actually are set up. So it's not like 0, 0, and then like 1, 1 under that. It's like 0, 0, and then 0, 3, because this is all in like the same section. So it's all like one set of information. There's no like it's kind of backwards, since 1, 1 typically would be below 0, 0 in like a grid. When we're talking about like front end development. So just so you guys aren't confused, when we're talking about one section here, we only have to really care about the item index. So there are 20, there are 20 items here. And we could see that because there are like 20 cells. Oh, no, I mean 21 cells. And yeah. And there are also some very key differences between table views and collection views. So with collection views, one of the best features about it is that you could scroll both vertically and horizontally. So previously in the Netflix example, you could see that I could slide from like left to right on my like Netflix videos and stuff. Whereas with table views, I couldn't really do that. And you could adjust the width and height of each cell. Yeah, and with table view cells, you can only really adjust the height of some row. And another cool thing is that you could create anything you could create with like table views, you could basically create the same thing using collection views. But for most things that are collection views, you can't really use table views. So for example, like the Netflix thing, like you could scroll left to right for some like collection of movies, but you can never implement a left to right scroll using a table view. Like UI table views only scroll vertically. So that's one of the key differences in why a lot of people prefer using UI collection views over table views. And yeah, any questions on this? So to talk more into depth about how we could actually change the layout of each cell. So here we have some different like cells 1 to 5, and cell 2 seems to have a different like height than some of the other cells, and like cell 4 has like some distance away from cell 1, and all that stuff we could set up using this object UI collection view flow layout. So this UI collection view flow layout tells you how like some items like are positioned with respect to one another. So you with like this collection view layout, you could specify like the scroll direction of your collection view, the inter item spacing, the item size, and the line spacing. And to go into what inter item spacing is, it's just the spacing between cells. So there's like that little like line, minimum line spacing, minimum interim spacing that tells you which direction the spacing is. And yeah, there's a more detailed example of that. So that's like the spacing. And you could customize all of this within your when you conform to like the UI collection on view flow layout. So it's a little bit arbitrary, but let me show you how it actually looks like in code. So when you create like your view controller that contains a collection view, you could set up that like interim and like spacing between the cells by conforming your view controller where you created your collection view to UI collection view delegate flow layout. And here you could specify like the minimum line spacing for section at. And as you can see, it returns like some CG float, which is basically just a number. So you could return some pixel size for like the minimum line spacing between like some cells in a section. And you could also declare what your minimum inter item spacing for section is, which also returns a float. So both of these return like numbers. So you could really just return like any arbitrary number. You could say like 4, 5, 6 pixels or something like that. But when you're trying to implement that spacing, you have to conform your view controller to this UI collection view delegate flow layout. And that's how you set up spacing. I think this is my last slide. Okay, that was my last slide. So project 4 is due tonight, like I said. We ended a bit earlier than usual. And I sent Justin the Kahoot. So
Yeah.
if you want to get the Kahoot set up for me. But any questions on any of that? It was a little bit fast paced. That was my fault. But it's basically the same idea as table views, except this time you have an option to scroll from left to right. And you're also talking about like items instead of just like individual rows. So yeah. Are you shorter than usual?
Must be your install.